So, so overall, good. So I'm jumping down to today's date. So one is, I tried to put this meeting in the recurring meetings calendar, and I either don't know how to do it or I don't have the rights. And this is just bookkeeping, but does anybody else know how to do that and or have the rights?
I could not figure it out either. So I think this would have to be Christopher or Mac who maybe would have to help with this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me just take a note of that.
Yeah, I can. I'll say I can.
Oh,
I can take
thanks.
some notes for you, so you can just lead.
Awesome. So, so I put together some new, based on the new data that Lily, thank you for collecting. I was able to identify some additional trends. So just some of the interesting things. Summary is, this is a number 2, is late MRs, late MRs being merged in more than 30 days. Days to review on late MRs is 28 days. On not late ones is 2 days, so 14x difference. And then the different days to review from first note. So regular MRs, 90th percentile is 2 days, and late MRs is 10 days. The average wasn't that different. It's really the high side. That's why I talked about 90th percentile. So 5x difference. Days from review to merge. From review to merge, regular MRs, actually all MRs 4 days, 29 days for late ones. MR assignments, so not days, but assignments. The assignments, all MRs 4, late MRs 8, so 2x difference. Number of pipelines, which I don't know which of these are useful or not, but I'm glad we were able to take a look at them. So number of pipelines, 7 for all MRs, 22 for late ones. So they tend to have 3x more pipelines. Files changed, and lines changed. Just a rough measure, probably a lousy measure, but a measure that we had, an indication of the amount of change. So 5 for all MRs, 12 for late MRs, so about double. And number of lines, just rough numbers, 200 for all MRs and 400 change lines for late ones. And okay, so anyway, that's that.
Yeah. Sorry, I had a few follow-up questions there. I was trying to get the median before this meeting, and I wasn't able to. But I'd be curious on files change and lines change for the median, because I know some of the nudging that we talked about was looking at how we can iterate or improve our iteration.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not. Yeah.
I think I actually pulled that. It's not easy to find. It's in that spreadsheet, but also I copied and pasted, but it's on the next page in the doc. So I added, well, actually, let me make sure. Yeah, I added average, median, and 90th percent.
Oh, down below. I should have just scrolled.
Well, it wasn't obvious. So yeah, so take a look at that. What are your thoughts?
And you said all MRs. That's all MRs for March, right?
Yes. Yeah. This scope was March. Okay. And the numbers are. I didn't compare non-late to late. I compared all to late. Just. I don't think it matters that much, but
yeah. I mean, the median still have, I would say, a much more pronounced gap between the late, but on those two fields. So
okay. And Lily, do you have any impressions on this data?
I'm so kind of curious as to so this is what it looks like for, I guess, as part of product, right? Do we know how this stacks up against other customers, or these are our stats for our company? If we hit that up against projects for other companies, do we see the same thing? As you're starting to dig deeper into this sort of trying to understand the metrics a little bit more.
I think it actually might be a great thing to study that, based on data that maybe is available elsewhere, where we're currently looking, on anonymized data across, like GitLab.com hosted projects, and might be actually good once we're effective with improving things without creating bigger problems than we're solving, which we have to be careful about. It sounds like it actually be, if we can find something that's effective, a good enhancement to GitLab overall.
Yeah, I agree.
So cool. So while we're moving on, if you could add that note in the text, Lily, that'd be great. as well.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and add it because I kind of started looking at this. The commit to merge histogram you're super familiar with that. So kind of looking at breaking the commit to merge histogram by different projects. I think I just have a lack of context and knowledge of how that data sits in our database. Like, I don't know if we can track back to a specific customer, but we have all the data for projects that exist outside of GitLab. So we can do it from like a project perspective to break this data down. And when I was doing the analysis, I actually didn't see many projects that had a large percentage of MRs greater than 30 days.
Across all GitLab.com hosted projects, or just, yeah, I think that's what you're saying, across all GitLab projects, hosted projects. Yeah, so maybe it's,
yeah.
There's also, there are quite a few GitLab.com hosted projects, and the trends on those would be potentially very different than trends for self-hosted customers, because some larger customers with, just let's just say large numbers of developers, some surely use GitLab.com, many hosted, many also run it locally, self-hosted. So we wouldn't, I think the GitLab.com hosted projects is skewed towards smaller numbers of engineers per project, I would guess. But I don't know that for a fact, but I would guess.
And even just
sense.
like the open source development that happens on GitLab.com. So like just other projects, it might just be one person. So the concept of something being reviewed, there isn't one, right? So the workflow that we have here isn't necessarily consistent with other projects, especially when you're looking beyond just our groups. But there should be some commonalities that we could, that might be able to be inferred there.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think it's a great idea, Lily, to study this across all projects and then potentially look at an improvement to GitLab that all customers can benefit, that all customers can potentially benefit from.
And the analytics team might be someone good just to have like a coffee chat with on that too. So like Jeremy, I think is the PM right now of that, and I'm not sure the EM, but yeah, I know they have a lot of ideas and a lot of things in flight for how to measure that review and pretty much that value stream, the value stream cycle time.
Cool. So Lily, thanks for adding the additional data on number of threads. I haven't studied it based on that, but basically I'm going to pull similar data, average, median, 90th percentile for all MRs and late MRs, and then see what the differences are. So I'll try to do that before next week.
Yeah, I think the numbers actually look pretty good. I was more so also curious if it would make sense to break down, because I know you did MRs merge in over 30 days, and the median and average, of course, is going to balloon out. They're going to be greater than what they normally are for all MRs. And so I'm thinking if it makes sense to filter that down to like MRs merge between 30 and 60 days, for example, just because I could see MRs like way greater outliers that would affect that numbers. Although if you're using median, that should probably be okay.
Yeah, that's why I did median and 90th percentile. But yeah, it's a good point is there's definitely significant, I don't remember the numbers, but it's something like of the ones that are greater than 30 days, like, I don't know, 50% of them are 30 to 60. And then the ones that are greater than 60, the range is really, it's really big. It's like, from 60 to 300. And there are some, way on the high side. And those are different patterns than ones that are, just slightly later than what we wanted, slightly later in 30 days. So Kyle, can you give an overview to the group, to us, on the scope status and next steps on that issue 453? I read through it, but it talks about a number of things I wasn't familiar with, although I'm more familiar with it today. Like, what does it look for? What actions does it take based on that, et cetera?
Yeah, so essentially what a triage package is going to be a collection of issues that it's going to be an issue that's created that collects a number of issues that fit a criteria that's defined, and then assigns that to someone for an action. So as we kind of went back and forth, I'd say over the last few days, we came to the conclusion of starting with a triage package on those stale MRs, so 2 weeks with no activity. And I think what would be best is to have it broken out at a group level. So each group that has MRs that fit this criteria would get its own triage package, assign that to an engineering manager. And then we need just, I would say, some help confirming what the language should be for what that engineering manager should do with this report. So the other group, I'll say issue triage package, is broken into sections, and each section has some specific guidance. And I'm not clear what we would want to tell engineering managers to do with this, or if it's like almost like a collection FYI, review these and see if there's any appropriate action.
So it's idle for 2 weeks is what it identifies now.
Not updated. And the key thing with not updated is once it's in the triage package, those MRs are updated. That affects the last updated date. Any activity on the MR would impact the last updated date. So that's where those subsequent nudges get a little intricate and challenging, and why I think the triage package would probably be the right way to start. And just one triage package, not updated in the last 2 weeks, and try to keep that simple.
Sounds great. I was going to ask you about what happens if it, if that counts as an update, and how often would it run? How often would the triage report be created?
We would do it every week. So once a week we would create it. How we do the group triage one is we close the one from the previous week automatically and just create a new one. I think we'd follow the same pattern here.
And I'd be happy, and I know we talked about it back and forth in the issue asynchronously, the triage packages versus comments and the issues. Comments and issues on something else had roughly a 6% success rate, where the comment.
Yeah, I do want to be clear. There's something in the data that I think that number is higher and potentially much higher, but that's just the best number I had at the moment. Okay. And I wanted to share it ahead of this meeting.
And a triage report, goes to the manager.
Yes.
Which isn't distributing the work automatically to the engineers, and that has its pros and cons. The pro is it doesn't become noise to the engineers. The negative is it centralizes it to the managers. But I think starting with the triage report sounds good, because then we can at least experiment there and see how effective it is, get feedback from the managers. What I would, and I'd be happy to look at the text. Is there example text in the issue on one?
So right now it's just built so it's one. So my plan is in the MR that I kind of linked to on here that says in progress, and then there's the MR that I would just propose some text with to Jinshin, and I'll tag you on that so that you can kind of tweak it there. And then my intent is once we settle on a structure of that triage package to add it back to the overall issue.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, which is great. And then how did we land on idle for 2 weeks and run it? It was idle 2 weeks and run it every week. How do we land on that?
It's the idle for 2 weeks, I think, is what came out of the initial items. I think, like the initial discussions.
I'm gonna go back to that. It feels a little.
We can change it.
It feels a little often, maybe too aggressive for first experiments. Let's see, 25% of MRs were idle greater than 1 month. One or more times are the ones that were late. And let's see here, idle MRs. If a merge request is idle greater than 2 weeks, a merge request is greater than 4 weeks. I would say to not.
We could do 4 weeks. Like it's a parameter, I would say, of the policy. That's not going to impact the effort very much. And I think go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's the direction I'm going. I'd say, what do you both think on? Let's experiment with idle of 4 weeks.
Okay.
And maybe run it every 6. The reason 6 sounds kind of weird, but the reason why is then it won't show up again. Like, I don't want the same one to show up every time, or flap of showing up in this report and then not showing up in the next one. And if it's not touched by somebody, then showing up in the next one and going back and forth. So what do you think of idle for 4 weeks and running it either every 6 or every 8?
Yeah, so sounds good. I think originally I was with 2 and 1. If we created every 1 week, that those MRs that are idle for 2 weeks, remember when they're mentioned in the report, it will be updated. So they're like the next week's run, they would no longer meet the criteria.
And then if somebody didn't look at them, they would come back on. And if nobody ever looked at them, it'd go on, off, on, off, on, off. And
Exactly.
other. Maybe that's okay.
Well, I see the problem you're trying to avoid. So like in my mind, I was thinking you would catch the most recent, these are now idle for 2 more weeks. But like you said, what that might lead to is just alternating reports with maybe adding a few on the bottom and taking a few.
The alternating might be okay, because it's like, well, maybe you missed it. Maybe you meant to, the manager meant to look at it. Maybe the manager decided not to, whatever. And then remind it again if it's still there. So how about, I like actually having it the same time frame, the running at the same time frame. So I was thinking initially the toggle back and forth didn't seem great, but now the more we talk through it, I do like it. So why don't we just change running it every 4 weeks and detecting issues that are idle for, MRs, merge requests that are idle for 4 weeks. So basically it's just double the time frame.
And then run it every 2.
Okay, and then run it every 2, and then running it every 2 weeks. Yep, just doubling the time.
Okay.
And I'll look at the text once you're ready, and then
Once it's
after we do this, then we start looking at the other trends. Are there other things we want to detect? This is idle time. Maybe it's the days. Just thinking about these here. MR assignments once it goes above some value, or I know we pulled the data on pipelines and files changed and lines changed, but I think those are probably bad ones to base it on, unless it's really high. Like if any of those are super high, then maybe tag it. But I think just starting with idle and then maybe we also in the future do total time open in the future. But let's start with idle. I think that'll help a lot, and then we go from there. How does that sound?
That sounds good to me.
What do you think, Lily?
Yeah, I probably just, for me, I need a little bit more context on the triaging and all of that. So I will do some reading to understand how they work.
Okay. Great.
There was 2 other, I would say, just quick things.
Please.
And maybe this is me coming out from a different direction, but I think in that set, I would be interested, this kind of goes back to Mech's point last week, I'd be interested to see how many of those issues that are in the merged in greater than 30 days just have like a documentation related label. Again, this is another thing I was trying to pull, where the throughput label may not indicate the type of work that it actually is. Because I think like there's some features, there's a significant number of backstage that seem like documentation is either a portion of it or the whole MR to me. And I think that may be a signal of these MRs are just deprioritized because in favor of something else, I would say. And then the other thing I wanted to call attention, so if we could get that.
Before you get past that, so yes, and knowing that we found where the labels were either not accurate or there were multiple labels of the ones, let's say backstage and documentation. And the way we analyze it, there's a preference. Like if it says label X and label Y, we choose X, and maybe we wanted to change it. Like a number of backstage ones were actually documentation ones. I think we anecdotally noted.
And I think feature was another one where that seemed to fit. So that's why I was thinking almost like a separate indicator. And where I was coming at this is I was looking at just backstage in general, across all, I'll say all MRs. and how we could get rid of the concept of backstage and migrate it over. And I was finding a significant shift to just documentation as you go historically throughout the life.
And you'd be able to figure
lifetime.
that out automatically, saying this isn't this, the MR is actually about documentation, and updating or adding the label automatically, or?
It's more, I would say, inferring it from the presence of other labels. So if I say how many, what I was looking for is what MRs are exclusively like backstage, so no feature, no anything else.
Yep.
And then of that population, how many of those MRs have things like, I mean, there was a list, but documentation was one of them, database, just all sorts
a
of
better way to
different-
determine the label based on
and then
data. I think we
Yep.
should definitely do that wherever we use the labels to classify the MRs. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I think, adding documentation to this set is probably not even worth anyone's time in doing, but I was more just curious if, like you said, anecdotally, you were seeing that. That's good enough for me. And
And I think Mick and Christopher and Sid, maybe some others, all said, yes, we want to get the labels more accurate in this
Yes.
classification. Now, I may be misquoting some of them. So, but I remember there was significant with people who came in the last 1 or 2 meetings. They were very interested in things around those lines. So I think that'd be great. If you could put notes, not now while we're talking necessarily, but on what the plan is, what you're proposing for that and the plan for that, that would be great.
Yep. Yeah, I was kind of in this analysis loop. So to get to the point where I had data to inform a plan, but I think I'm just going to create an issue to just start and say, like, this is the objective. This is the work that's in progress to come up with the plan, because it's taken too long. Like this is a lot of data to try and, I'll say, fiddle through. And I'm not as good at it as Lily. So.
Sounds good. It sounds like a great idea. Was there another item as well, Kyle, or was that both?
That was it.
Great. Lily, anything else to add?
Nope, good from my end.
Good stuff. Okay. Well, thank you both. We'll meet again next week. I think I made this recurring for 4 weeks. Maybe we don't need all 4. We just, go to issue comments, after that point. Or maybe we make it less often, but this has an intended end time of this recurring meeting. Right now it's 4 weeks. So, but I think we're making great progress and doing some pretty cool things.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks everybody.
Thanks for leaning it up, Wayne. See ya.
Cheers.